Can I just jump on a
Yeah.
bit of, I think Tim alluded to something that we talk a lot about, that it's not just technology, it's
Yeah.
process and people. And so we can deliver software to people. And if this is a complete sort of rewrite of their day-to-day and their process, and nobody's using it the right way, the rules and the internal processes aren't established, they're not enforced. You heard kind of the laundry list of what Pioneer does as it relates to if things happen and people weren't doing it the right way. We've actually got a dealer group in southwestern Ontario that actually makes their salespeople sign a waiver, essentially, which is probably the most I've seen on that, where it's like you're responsible for the full costs of that fraud. So it doesn't have to be that, but all it needs to be is we're using this technology. This is what it does. This is what it's meant to prevent. This is when you're going to use it. These are the exceptions, if any. And then when things happen, then you've got the ability to work with us, for instance, on understanding, as Tim said, what these results mean and then what we should do. And we see probably, I think Anne-Marie's going to get into this a bit more in her presentation, but anywhere from 3 to 5% of the thousands and thousands of transactions we're now processing are actually true fraud. So that's a big number once you get into the tens of thousands of transactions. And this gets to, I think what Tim alluded to and a bit of Brad is that we've got this traditionally analog industry that's trying to shift to digital. The fraudsters are just way more better armed with technology. That's a massive gap there. We've seen the democratization of fraud, essentially, with what generative AI has been able to do. And so it's ripe for the picking, basically, for fraudsters now. And so it's really important, though, not just to put software in people's hands. We go through pretty extensive training for people that are going to use it. We talk to them about how to remediate any sort of lighting or those kind of issues in the ID verification process. And then ultimately, when we get something that's actually fraud, we're talking to them about what to do. Anne-Marie is our head of fraud and gets involved in that. She's got 30 years of financial crimes investigations and pretty well connected into law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't need to be the answer, but I think increasingly we're starting to see that, at least for us and our dealer partners, that they are getting law enforcement a lot more involved. And I think it's probably around, and Tim and Brad, you can comment in your perspective, but where we sort of just had enough, right? We've actually got some dealers who weren't doing it at the beginning, and then now they are. So yeah, I think there's a whole ecosystem here that, and it's good that we've got multiple providers now that have sort of recognized the need and therefore the opportunity to come in here, because it's really going to take a few of us to kind of really shift the mindset here. Of course, the other thing too, if you don't know already, I'm sure you do, is that fraud really is like a flood that comes in, and when you put up the sandbags around your house, the water just goes somewhere else. And that's really what you want to do. And as fraud goes somewhere else, if you're the one that doesn't have those sandbags and the water keeps rising, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse.
Yeah, it's I mean, I was fascinated too by the dealers having their salespeople sign contracts. I mean, then the lawyers come back into play again, sign contracts that they're going to be liable for the fraud if they're not following the processes, right? But
that gets to the potential misalignment. So I think anybody who knows anything about auto finance and dealerships is that, on the one hand, you've got the dealer principal, that's the person who owns the business and the P&L of that business. On the other hand, you have a bunch of salespeople and F&I managers who are, got their own growth targets, they've got their own sales targets, and as they say in the business, they're trying to move metal. Yeah. And oftentimes then and you've got sort of as this transaction gets further and further down the pipeline, and this is what happens in auto finance and probably mortgages as well, you've got two really high intent individuals there. You've got a salesperson, or in the case of mortgages, a mortgage broker. You've got a customer who's actually a fraudster. They both really want this transaction to happen. And we're just that little wedge in the middle saying, wait a sec, we don't think this should happen. And it's the dealer principal, the owner of the business, obviously, that's pretty grateful when that happens.